Ooh, that's cold. Cold concrete. What's up, guys? Welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the Tamron 45 f1.8 VC. I'm going to use the drift method. Freaking incredible. Round F16 for that to get that sunburst. So if you guys saw my last video about how well it does with video and the unboxing and stuff, I mentioned that I have a lot to go over with this lens. So we're going to start, I'm going to break it up into pieces. So today's going to be all about portraits. So I think that's going to be one of the most popular reasons why people like this lens. Well, there's a lot to like about it, but definitely portraits. That's one thing that I got it for. So rather than compare it to anything, because I don't really have another 50mm right now to compare it to. So rather than compare it to anything, I'm just gonna go out and shoot like I normally would and put it up to my standards of a professional shoot. And I'm gonna let you guys know if I think it's good enough for me to use and for you to use and all of that good stuff. So let's start off with the portraits. I'm gonna do a mix of portraits. I'm gonna do some close-ups and some wide opens and some stop downs and some with backlit and flares and all that good stuff. So let's get into it and see how it does. Alright, so we're back from doing the portraits and I've had a chance to look at the images. So before we go any further, I just want to say this is not going to be a scientific review. This isn't going to be me pixel peeping or analyzing or comparing or any of that. I'm going to show you guys some of the flaws that I found, some of the things that I like, but mostly I just want you guys to see the images that I got and how I edited them, and so you'll be able to see. And then when we get done with this, I'll give you the rundown on what I think of the images after having shot and edited the portraits. So let's go ahead and jump into Photoshop. Alright, so let's jump right into it. Here's the first one that I liked, and I'll go ahead and bring it up in camera raw, and I'll reset the raw so you guys can see what it is looking like. Alright, so that was the before, and you'll notice that it's super lack of contrasty here, and that's because of the way that we're shooting into the sun here. And you'll notice this flare. That's definitely noticeable. And then maybe if we zoom in here, you can definitely see the chromatic aberration that I'm talking about, both green and magenta. So we can fix that though if you come into here. If you just do the regular remove chromatic aberration, some lenses it does a good job and some lenses it doesn't. This one it does not. So it does have the profile correction, but that does not have anything to do with the chromatic aberration. So you're gonna have to go into manual and then slide these up. So let's look at the magentas and we'll slide it up. So they're pretty much gone. Don't slide them up too hard, otherwise it'll start making the other one wonk out. So then we're gonna go up to the greens and slide that one up. I'm gonna adjust my hue a little bit here for the greens and just open it up. So that didn't remove like 100% of it, but it did remove 99% of it, I think. So that looks a lot better. And that was in most of them that I saw. Anything where you have harsh contrast between light and dark and strong backlit stuff is really where you're gonna see that chromatic aberration. So let's look at another one. So here we have another one, and let's open up this raw here. So this is one of the ones that I actually did get pretty sharp there. I don't think I could have done really a better job with focusing on this one. That was not the normal though, because yeah, I was at 1.8 and that's just super shallow. So we're not as directly backlit here, and we can see still some chromatic aberration. We don't see it as much, again, because the backlighting has changed and it's no longer completely behind her. Now it's off to the side. So pulling her away from that, it helped, but it's still there. So again, fix it like I showed you before, and it's not a problem. And no flare on this one, very minimal. Actually, I think that's just the background. So no flare on this one. So again, just rotate your subject a little bit, or you rotate yourself just a little bit, and you should be able to knock that flare out. So let's look at these. These are there's some of these that I really liked, but then like we really liked this one, but then we get up close to it and we totally missed focus. So you can see it right there. You can see it just half an inch off. And that's, you know, that's probably a combination of user error and just, you know, we weren't on a tripod, it's handheld, and it's wide open 1.8. So that's really, really hard to pull off. Maybe on Facebook or whatever, this would be possibly okay, especially if you added a little clarity to the eyes and a little bit extra sharpening, that sort of thing. I probably could have got away with it, but using it as a just tack sharp professional shot there, I wouldn't use it. So that's how most of these were. Again, you know, some of these that may have been cool. That one actually looks like pretty close. Well, it might be a little bit off. So it's hard to tell. Again, we're shooting full body and you can really see the magenta bad in here. Let's see if we can even clean that up. But yeah, that goes away. See, I mean, just quarter of the slider and that's gone. Okay, so here's one that I did and we'll look at the backlight. So let me open up the raw. So you can see here in the raw, you can see this flare here on her thigh and around her boot. You can see that, and then you can see this big flare right here. And again, that's just physics. That's, you know, shooting directly into the sun is going to, pretty much every lens is going to flare. Now, how much is based on the coatings and, you know, the quality of the glass and all that. Like I said, I've seen worse. So that's the flare. And then if you look here, you can see that in the final image, I took it out. So I took out the one on her thigh and I took out the flare right there. I didn't take this big ring out. You can see that right there. And I didn't take this one out because I just didn't want to spend that much effort on it. And I think it looks all right, just like that. Without those two distracting ones that you see here and here, I think that's perfectly fine and maybe even stylistic for the shot. Okay, so let's look at some of these. So here's the next one that I did. And this is probably 20 minutes after sunset. And we're shooting at f1.8, 1/80th of a second, ISO 640, and you can see here that I brought it up in post just a little bit. I think I brought it up by about maybe 2/3 of a stop just on her face with the overexposure right there. But this was another prime example of like missing autofocus. Like that one's completely out. And if we look at this one here, it's hard to tell. But that whole thing is soft. You can see it missed focus. There's her ear is in focus, but her eyes are out of focus. So again, that's just a pitfall of shooting at wide open, especially in low light. So you might get an idea of how well that worked. I think this one, you know, you look at it, might be. So this one is in focus. So that one, I think it locked onto that contrast and the whites in her eyes were brighter and I think it just locked on better. But you know, that wasn't a shot that I wanted to edit, so we finally settled on that one, and that's how it did after I cleaned it up, and I think it looks quite nice. For me, that's an acceptable image for sure. So there's the JPEG. So, and then another thing about these ones is the bokeh here. This is wide open at 1.8. It's not that bad. If you zoom in heavily on it, you are going to see some of the onioning effect. But it's not horrible, so especially if you don't zoom in too much. And I think this is quite pleasing actually, especially compared to some other things that I've seen for sure. So I'm pretty happy with that for the most part. They're not quite solid, but if I stop down to maybe f2, they probably would be. That might be a sweeter spot for the bokeh. So here is the shot. Here's the last shot that we did that I got in focus, and this was where it was getting difficult. Again, no tripod, no eye detect, none of that. I just held my cell phone up and put it on her face and lit it a little bit, but for the most part, I'm still f1.8, 1/100th of a second, ISO 1250. So I wanted this one to be a little bit darker so you can kind of see, and I think, you know, we're looking at maybe 10 different images or so, and I think I got focus on 3 of them, like solid at wide open on her face. So, and I didn't end up editing this one, but I'll show it to you real quick. But you can see here, I definitely, getting closer to it, I definitely nailed focus on her eye, but I'm standing much, much closer to her. And so the closer you are to your subject is definitely going to help focusing during low light, especially because we had the light coming in on her eye and it made it really easy to lock on. All right, so that wraps it up. Let's hop out of this and get back to the real world. All right, so what you guys think? First of all, if you have any questions about anything you just saw or any thoughts, leave those in the comments below. But what do I think? So there are a few problems that I saw with the lens, and that's definitely like what we saw with the chromatic aberration was kind of bad. Not as bad as some lenses that I've had, but it's there, it's noticeable, so that's the thing to keep in mind. You can fix it though, like I did. The flaring it's kind of middle of the road. I think it's okay for some things, but obviously you can see in my images I did get quite a bit of flare with that super harsh direct sunlight back there, so maybe kind of avoid putting yourself in that situation if you can. Another thing that I noticed is that it was kind of difficult to focus, and you know, I mean, that's to be expected. When I was shooting at 1.8 wide open, it's not recommended. Shooting at wide open like that at such a shallow depth of field is incredibly difficult. Maybe if you have like a newer camera that has the eye detect or something, but I don't. I'm just shooting on my 5D4 and my 1DX2, and in low light, at wide open, or just at wide open in general, if you're not too close to them, like if you're back like I was for a good half shot, half body shot portrait or whatever, it becomes kind of difficult to nail that autofocus. And that's not really the lens's fault, that's just physics. You know, super shallow depth of field is very difficult. So I would definitely recommend stopping down to like 2.8 or something. And when I did that, it became a lot easier, and you get more of their eyes in focus, and you know, so. Okay, so those are all kind of the negatives, or you know, not really negatives, but things to be aware of. I'm pretty sure that's a thing. So aside from those, I really still love this lens. I love the shallow depth of field. Maybe not so much for portraits, again, you know, just be careful with that, but I do love the fast prime. I love that it has VC. The vibration control is really going to help you out in low light especially. I do love that this lens is still sharp, like even with all that stuff, it's still, I've not had a problem with sharpness. Again, I'm not going to compare this to some of my other lenses because that's not fair, but I will say that it's sharp enough for my needs as a professional photographer, and I will continue to use this lens on professional shoots, whether that be portraits or video or whatever I need it for. I'm gonna keep this in my bag. And that was kind of the whole gist of this review, is so you guys could see how I'm using it. Oh, another thing about the way that I shot. So I didn't use any lighting when I did the portraits. I didn't use, and it was all natural light. I didn't want to add any additional helpers or modifiers to that, with the exception of the very last image. I used my cell phone light. Just to shine a little bit of light on her face when it was getting super dark. That was about 20 minutes after sunset, so it was really dark. There was like one overhead street light and just my cell phone line, that's it. So I just wanted to keep it real natural so you guys can see what it looks like in a natural environment. So if you're not in a studio, or you know how I have my modifiers and my speed lights and all that, so I didn't use any of that stuff. This was all just straight up natural light, and I really enjoy this lens. I love the weather sealing on it. I love knowing that I can take it out into these dusty places where I live. I feel confident that I could take it out into, you know, a light rain or whatever and get those kind of shots if I need to. So all of those are all of those are big pros in my mind, and this lens is gonna stay in my bag. I'm gonna do a lot more testing on this too. So in the next part of the review, I'm gonna do a landscape review and kind of a street photography, kind of a everyday, and then a close-up, like a pseudo macro type of review, because that's the other reason I got this lens. Out of all the 50mm, or close to, you know, it's 45, but out of all the relatively 50mm ranges, this has the closest minimum focusing distance. So that's really gonna help you get close to stuff, blow that background out even more, and get that kind of macro looking shot without an actual macro. So I'm gonna do some stuff like that and show you guys what I think and how it works and all of that good stuff. So if you have any questions about anything that I went over, or didn't go over, leave those in the comments below and I'll definitely answer them. Definitely make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I've got new videos every Tuesday and Friday. Hit that like button if this video helped you out. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.